I'm here with James at Llewellyn, and we are actually filming on my phone's camera because my video camera decided that it didn't want to play nice today. But he is here to teach me about skeletal materials. So, can you tell me a little bit about what you know about some skeletal materials?
Sure. Well, there's basically three types of skeletal material. There's bone, horn, and antler. And antler and horn have a lot in common. They're pretty similar. They both have hollow insides. With antler, the insides are kind of a pithy material. They just don't carve well, and they're not as strong as the outside core. So here's the pithy material.
I think we need to get it under the
All right.
Oh yeah, there we can see it now.
And then the harder antler on the outside. So when you're carving objects out of antler, if you need larger pieces and it's actually going to get into the pith, it really doesn't look as good. So you want to try to carve things that take advantage of the outer skin. Pin cases are pretty popular. Buttons will work. I think I have a button over here somewhere out of an antler. Oh, it's vanished. But you can carve the tips of the antlers like this, and you can slice them very easily into button shapes, or game pieces, etc. So, with bone, I use sterilized beef bone that you buy at a pet store for your dog to chew on. I like the sterilized part because you don't have to worry about any bad contagions. You have to wear a mask when working with any of these materials because the dust can be extremely dangerous. It's kind of like asbestos. It's a very fine particulate, and it doesn't decay rapidly. So you don't want that collecting in your lungs. And
so you've done some work on this piece of bone already.
Yeah, I've done. I don't know if it'll show up, but what I've done is I've done a basic weave pattern, Norse weave pattern, if you will, started with the dots and then drew in the weave and then carved away. The great thing about bone, sort of like working with wood, once you've done all your carving, you can top sand it to smooth off whatever's left of the red markings. You can see a little bit left here that I haven't quite carved out. It's a very hard material. It carves well. It takes a good bit. It sands well, and you can make some really hard things out of it. Knife handles. Ryan's actually working on a tip for an atlatl,
which is a
large spear.
Oh, okay.
Large throwing spear, and it's sharp enough you could do surgery with it, and hard enough that it'll probably last 1 or 2 shots before it breaks. But that's
out of bone, beef bone.
This is out of also beef bone.
So the differences between the hardnesses and the way you can work with the different things are the
bone can be thicker in a lot of places than antler or horn, depending on the type of antler you can acquire. So if you're looking to do something larger like dice or knife handles, something that needs thick material all the way through, then I think the bone is the better choice because generally you can get thicker material in bone. In period, they would have cut the bone off in slabs using a variety of hand saws, like something like this here. So they can have a smaller blade. This is a bow saw, frame saw rather, that uses just pressure here to keep the saw blade tight because it would have been a very thin steel that they wouldn't have been able to cut without the frame saw. And you can cut the bone into some pretty thick slabs. I had one piece left here, cut into a slab, and then it's easy to work with at that point when you get it nice and flat. And like I said, it is very thick. You got enough here on the end that you could easily do a set of dice or taffel game pieces, that sort of thing. With horn, you're very limited in the shapes you can use. An antler, you're going to have mostly cylindrical. At its thickest, red deer horn was popular in period. At its thickest, you're talking maybe 1 inch in diameter. So a pretty decent knife handle maybe, or a pin case or that sort of thing, but you're not going to get any larger pieces out of it, especially with the softer interior.
And so the bone is the hardest?
The bone is the hardest, yes.
And then
the horn and antler are kind of toenail soft. I mean, they're malleable. You can soak them in hot water for a long time, like boiling water, and they will soften up. You can straighten these horns out.
Oh.
I've seen examples of shot glasses, drinking cups that are straight. They just soften it up. And when I made the gems horn, we actually had to soften up this edge here to put the wooden plug in. And it'll get, not rubbery soft, but it'll get soft enough that you can stretch it quite a bit, because it is basically just like toenail material, like fingernail material. It will soften in water. and bone, of course, does not. Antler softens to some degree, but not as much as horn. And yeah, that's pretty much it as far as the things you can make out of the antler. And I'm gonna make a pin case out of this one because I think it's shaped really nice for it.
Okay, so what you can carve with hand tools.
Yes.
But that takes forever.
You can carve with hand tools. I've only tried it a couple of times. The tools they used back then, gravers, they were basically chisels with really tiny tips, and you can either work them by hand, you can tap them with small wooden mallets or lead mallets, brass mallets, etc. Difficult in the extreme. So when I see these examples of scenes of the Virgin Mary in a brass or in an ivory casket, I'm just amazed at how they managed that entirely with hand tools. There is evidence that they used bow drills and bow lathes to turn bone material. A bow drill is just a drill bit with a wooden collar on it, and then you drill. It's just like you're making a fire, but it was originally a tool for drilling before it was a fire making tool. The bow lathe just puts a chunk of bone material onto two pins, and then you use the same bow to spin it, and then you turn it like you would a table leg or anything that spinning can do.
But you prefer to use...
I like to use power tools because I'm not really a master bone carver. I just need bone material occasionally for some of my other projects.
So these are a bunch of little drill bits
Right.
and sanding discs and...
Engraving tools come in basically like three types. You've got ones with stones on the end, ones with diamond wheels on the end, and then ones that actually have carbide cutting. I have a big one of these. The camera will probably give you a shot of. Carbide cutting blades actually have the steel blades. They all cut well, but they make more dust in order of from left to right here. So the carbide cutter makes larger chunks. The diamond makes a lot of dust, and then the stone makes an unusual amount of dust. And it also has a tendency to scald the bone, so you get not only bone dust, but burnt bone dust, which can be pretty unpleasant, depending on who you are.
Yeah, it probably smells really good.
And it smells really good.
And so you have these Dremel tools,
Right.
these power rotary tools that you can
I will drive
change.
them with Dremel tools, and then I also have a small handheld tool. It has some advantages, but it also has some drawbacks. It's turning a lot faster, 20,000 RPM. The disadvantage, it doesn't have a whole lot of power, so as you get into the bone, you'll come to a stop quite a bit. So then you get a halting jerkiness to your carving. So, but I use the Dremels quite a bit, and only bought this recently, thinking maybe you might appreciate it. So we'll see if that's better or worse for you. You'll have.
Well, and Ryan here is completely outfitted and ready to work with bone with the mask and the safety goggles. So we will all be wearing masks and safety goggles when working with the bone because we don't want to breathe in any of the bone dust or get any of those pieces in our eyes. All right. Okay, so I just want to start slow.
Pull it towards you. There you go.
I'm getting close. Oh, no, sorry.
And there we are. 2 buttons.
Awesome. So this is a button that you've already made, and you just used a drill to drill 4 holes in it.
Right.
And it feels really smooth. Now compared to this one that I just cut, this feels really rough, and I don't know if you can see there's a little burr.
Right. I generally work those edges with some sandpaper. You can work them on. I'm a big fan of sanding sponges because they last a lot longer and they're a lot easier on the hands to hold.
Okay.
And just work the button back and forth to smooth it. You can also use the faithful Dremel with a sanding wheel to ruffle those burrs out.
Okay. So what happens now? We drill the holes first, and then we do some.
It doesn't matter
fanciness
the
on
order. You can drill your holes first and put your 4 holes in it, and then you can carve the edges. You can sand them. You can do quite a bit of things. You can put a hole dead center, and then mount it on a Dremel. I can show you how to do that. And then you can spin it on a piece of sandpaper and get almost a perfectly round button. If you want to go that route as well.
I don't think it
Okay.
doesn't need to be perfectly round.
So we'll take the burr. In fact, I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll take the burrs off for you here with this tool.
Okay. And this has just got a sanding wheel on the Dremel.
On the Dremel, right?
Okay.
So we'll take that burr down, and then we just run around the edge a little bit. Turn it over and get the other edges. And it's nice and smooth. We can smooth the surface, the top surface out with the same Dremel wheel, or we can run it back and forth on our sanding sponge here until we get a nice smooth button when we want to work with it. And you see the scratches will come out very quickly in bone. That's one thing I like about it. It will work very quickly on sandpaper, stones, which I imagine was what made it so popular. So that'll make it more and more smooth. And of course, being a button, you want it to be nice and smooth. So it'll come in.